I'm sitting across from F. LaGard Smith. And for those of you who might not have heard of the gentleman before or have read any of his books, I did find your bio very interesting because I know that you're a professor of law at Pepperdine. I know that you're an author, but they gave you a different title that I had not heard before, and Bible scholar.
It's an unusual title for me because most people would not attribute that to me.
And I didn't. So welcome to this interview, but explain to me, Bible scholar.
I think the reason that comes up is because of the Daily Bible, which is the paperback version of the narrated Bible, which has been out for some time, in which the New International Version is arranged chronologically for daily reading. And obviously, I am in touch with the scholars in order to be able to do that kind of thing. But my background is in law.
That's what I thought.
Right.
Which, I mean, and you are also the author of Out on a Broken Limb. So what they didn't call you, but what I might have attributed to you is that New Age expert.
I think over the past several years, I've been doing a lot in the New Age.
I mean, I think that would be fair. But now let's get to the new book. And you have to tell me when it's due at. It's called When Choice Becomes God.
It's out.
It's out.
It will be on the bookshelves very soon now.
Okay, When Choice Becomes God. You know, as I was taking a look at this book, the title, the first thing that came to my mind is semantics. Kind of like, 40 years ago, the word gay was a descriptive term for one's personality, lifestyle, mood for the day. And we have managed through semantics to totally misuse that word. And now, if you say gay, it automatically reflects the lifestyle of the homosexual community. Choice. Are we ripping apart semantically the true meaning of the word choice through the pro-choice movement?
We really are, because when you think of pro-choice, you think of those who are in favor of abortion. And that's not really true anymore because most people in America are personally against abortion, but nevertheless they're still pro-choice. And it's interesting that the word choice comes all the way from God. It was God who gave us choice. Choose you this day whom you will serve. I mean, God is the ultimate pro-choice individual because he gave us choice. The problem is that there's some choices that are not the right choice, and some choices we don't have the right to make. And so there is the perversion of the word choice. It's been taken over, like so many words are taken over by the liberal camp and given a meaning all their own, as if there's something glorious and wonderful about their use of the word choice and something terribly wrong when we say some choices are not the right choice.
What do you consider the true definition of choice?
Well, choice is deciding between options. And we still have that with regard to abortion. Obviously we do, because we are free-will human beings. But to say that we have the right to choose in every case does not mean that those options ought to be exercised, let's say in this instance, when we're talking about abortion, against life, because that is not an option that we are given by God. Option in the sense that we can do it if we want to violate God's will, not an option if we want to do what is right in God's sight.
Why have we allowed, and I mean, you don't have any choice here other than to call them the pro-choice movement, but why have we sat back, do you feel, and allowed them to take the stance of pro-choice and give the entire word an incorrect definition?
Because we're a pro-choice generation, even Christians today, and particularly the under 30 group that she's very happy to acknowledge across the table.
Barely. Yes.
But the under 30 group, I mean, has grown up in a time when choice has become God. Individual right of choice to choose what you want to do has been the hallmark of particularly the younger generation. And that's what's familiar to and comfortable for so many people today. So what we are doing is we're part of the problem. We think in terms of choice as being the American way. It sounds American, doesn't it?
It sure does.
On Friday night, what do? Take the kids out. Are we going to go to pizza or hamburgers? If hamburgers, is it McDonald's or Burger King? If McDonald's, is it the Big Mac or the Quarter Pounder? You get up to the counter there, and is it for here or to go?
Yes.
Afterwards,
choice almost goes hand in hand with freedom in Americans' minds.
Absolutely. 31 flavors of ice cream.
That's right.
All the way down the line. Stay at home on Friday night, and you got the Zapp in your hand. You can just zap the channels, choice, 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 choice. So we get used to choice in the marketplace, and we cannot distinguish between choice in the marketplace and choice in morals. That's what really has happened, even among Christians.
Okay, then let me ask this. What happened in a nation that really and truly was birthed on godly beliefs and principles? And I know there's an easy answer to this question, but I'm looking for the difficult one. What was the turning point that all of a sudden the choice that says it's okay to abort an unborn child became so acceptable? Now, I know the easy answer to this, and I'll even tell you, well, Satan is alive and well on planet Earth. Thank you. And I realize that is the easy answer. But somehow or another, morality has really gotten perverted so that my generation really does not live by it anymore.
Yeah. Well, there was no single turning point, and that's sort of the whole idea, because if there had been a single turning point, everyone would have gasped in amazement. It's been a slow, subtle, silent process.
Since when? When do you think it started?
I think major forces that really came into play, the World Wars. Before the World Wars, we were isolated as a nation, pretty much. Mm-hmm. But the boys went overseas, and once they've seen Paris, what are you going to do with them after that point? New ideas, new cultures, new religions, new thoughts came to our shores, came back home with the boys. And while the boys were away fighting the war, the women were taking over jobs in the factories and so forth. So new changes there, new attitudes in sexual and gender roles. There were some things that took place in terms of transportation. The automobile gave us so many options in terms of where we would go, where we would live, and so forth. I find automobiles just intriguing in this whole process because they have so many options themselves, mm-hmm. and yet they reflect lifestyles. Remember the old station wagons with 6 kids in them going across the country, and they were excited about looking at the Burma Shave signs. No kid would do that today. They'd be looking at the Nintendo or something in the back seat. But it was the station wagon, and then it got down to be the two-family two-family garage, or two-car family. I'm sorry, I'm getting this backwards. I'll wake up here in a minute. But the two-car family, representing the woman working, the man working, the children going to school, everybody having to go 30 different places. And now it's sort of the singles in the fast lane with the two-seater sports car and the fax machine and so forth. What I'm suggesting here is that lifestyle has changed. It's changed in terms of its pace. It's changed in terms of its options. It's changed in terms of what it reflects in what we want. And what we want is immediacy. And abortion is one of those immediate kinds of things. It solves a big problem immediately, quickly.
Now, I'm going to have to be the first here to admit that I probably enjoy living in 1990 much more than I would enjoy going back and living in 1950. There's a part of me that really likes all the choices and all the immediacy and being able to have my little laptop computer with me when I go on an airplane and get everything done all at once. So what's the compromise?
Well, the compromise is that we can have a different lifestyle in terms of pace and options in the marketplace, as long as we remember that choice in morals doesn't have that same luxury. We cannot pick and choose among morals in the same way that we can pick and choose among clothes and shoes and where we live and so forth. That's where we've lost the distinction, that we just believe that choice is endless as opposed to choice being limited in some areas.
What areas do you feel are limited?
Well, choices and morals. I mean, we do not set morality. Morality is a law that's written. We always call it the higher law, the unalterable law. It's a point of transcendence that transcends all of our daily activities. So we can change secular laws, and the Supreme Court has done that in terms of any number of things, including abortion. Legislatures are doing it with regard to any number of things, including abortion. You can change all of those things. You can change them in favor of abortion. You can change them against abortion. But we will never change the law that dictates what we feel about abortion. I'll tell you something fairly revealing, I think, in terms of my own book. 9 months ago, I was neutral on the issue of abortion. Now, that's going to come as a surprise. It would come as a surprise to most of my friends who think I'm just a little to the right of Attila the Hun.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm...
And certainly a Christian author for many years.
Yes.
But it's one of those areas where I think, along with millions of other people, millions of other Christians. We have not thought it through. We just haven't thought it through, haven't needed to, perhaps. But my own thinking was prepared for a radical change by knowing that a large number of women with whom I'm acquainted have now had abortions. I used to not know any women. I think those of us who are older, we just didn't know anyone who'd ever had an abortion. Now I run into women all the time who've had abortions. And the thing that kept hitting me over and over again is that not one of them emerged emotionally unscathed. Not one. Greater and lesser extent, some terrible, some more minimal, but always affected by it. And it kept hitting me that if, in fact, abortion is morally neutral, it wouldn't affect these women that way. And the problem is that God's law can't be ignored. Whether we want to, whether we try to, whether we think we can, the law always has an impact on us. And if we violate the law, then we're going to be hurting.
How closely do we tie God's law to secular law?
We used to tie it extremely closely. I mean, from the laws of Moses on down. The laws of Moses, of course, were both secular and religious in their nature and content. And we incorporated into the English common law much of the laws of Moses, a lot of it just very directly. I teach criminal law and the laws against criminal homicide. I mean, we pulled them right out of the laws of Moses. And that's lasted all the way down through the early years of the development of England, and we brought it over into the colonies and incorporated it into our legislation. And we still today pay lip service, obviously, to things like thou shalt not kill. But see how far we've gone afield when we take the common law against abortion. And now, in this dramatic turnaround in 1970s, the U.S. Supreme Court undoes centuries of legal precedent and separates for the first time the civil or secular law from the criminal law that's been around for so long that's based on morality. And all that is doing is reflecting a society. It's not just the court off on its own. The court was reflecting a society that has now separated, segregated God's law from man's law. It's been put by other people as the attempt to achieve a naked public square. We don't want God involved in politics or law. We don't want God involved in hardly anything in our life anymore.
Let me ask you something that I've always been curious about, though, because, as you say, our laws really are based on morality. And when you're dealing with, like, the Supreme Court, and when you're dealing with a case, I don't know, Roe versus Wade, that's as good a case as any, since we're talking about abortion, and they're making a constitutional decision that the Supreme Court makes, how can they not follow that letter of the law that really did come from God's law, yet come up with a result that is so opposite?
You have a secular mindset. You have a secular mindset in society. You have a secular mindset among those who are chosen from society to be the Supreme Court justices. And you have enough of them on the court, or have had enough in the past at least, hopefully it's changed in the future, who are willing to allow their secular thinking to invade the decisions that they make. And, you know, if they were making them in favor of morality, we would want their consciences to dictate that. Right. So it's not that we're saying you shouldn't allow your conscience to dictate a judicial decision. Right. But our concern is that we become pro-choice in our consciences, so much so that we're going to allow virtually anything to happen. When you can go from allowing homosexuality to be brought out of the closet into public, that's a giant step. When you can allow divorce to be just so incredibly commonplace that it just happens right, left, and center, that's a big step. When you can allow, in effect, drug use, we don't legalize it necessarily, but there are calls for that today. But we allow it in other kinds of ways because we're not stopping it. That's a big step. Any of those are big moral steps, giant moral steps. However, when you get to an issue like abortion, when people like myself for years could go along with, at least be neutral toward abortion, and then for the court to legalize it, we have not taken just a giant step. We have we have taken a quantum leap, because now what we're talking about is, for the very first time, that the law gives credibility and authorization to the killing of human life. Now, that's why abortion is such a critical issue, because it puts all the other moral issues in the spotlight and focuses on that. If we can kill unborn children legally, then there is sort of no end to the erosion of morality in society.
Let's talk about that thing that you said, killing unborn life. In my mind, and in your mind, abortion is murder.
Well,
am I correct?
You're talking to a criminal law professor here,
Okay.
and I would just say this, that I'm more cautious about the use of murder than other people would be, because I look at it from a technical standpoint. I think abortion is morally wrong, and I think that from a legal standpoint, if we were to put a label on it, it would be more akin to manslaughter for most women.
Okay.
And this is splitting hairs for those who are not lawyers, but I think we ought to be real careful in putting the label murder onto abortion when it's certainly morally wrong. There's no question about that. But I want to reach people if we can, rather than to criticize them to the extent that we can no longer reach them.
Okay.
I don't want to stigmatize and run people in the opposite direction when we can win people over by simply saying it's enough, is it not, that we are killing human life and that it's obviously morally wrong.
One of the arguments off of this that I've heard used by the pro-choice movement over and over and over and over again, actually it's not an argument, it's a term, viable life. Now, I looked up the definition of viable in my dictionary last night, and if you're going to believe Charles Webster, the definition of viable is capable of success or living or capable of developing. It confuses me how society cannot consider an unborn child a viable life. Obviously, that unborn child is capable of developing. It's developing at that very instant, every second. Obviously, it is capable of success. Being born, being one of the first successes that I would think that they would, accomplish. And obviously, it is capable of living. I mean, we've heard stories upon stories about premature births and how soon an infant can be born, and with today's modern medicine, can be kept alive. How are they able to use the argument of viable life as a justification?
Of course, they're not disagreeing with you on what you're saying, that the child is capable of living if left in the womb. Viability has to do with what happens to the fetus after it comes out of the womb. Is it capable of living then? Well, the answer in most cases when you're talking about abortions of 6, 10, 12 weeks or so forth, no, it's not capable of living. Mm-hmm. But it's such a phantom argument, because it's not meant to be capable of living any more than a fish out of water or an astronaut in outer space without a pressure suit on. It is the most incredibly imaginative argument someone can come up with, to say, well, if we took the baby out of its proper environment and left it on its own, it couldn't live anyway. What a crazy argument to make. Of course it couldn't live. Right. If someone were to suck us off of the womb of Mother Earth into a hostile environment, we wouldn't live either. We wouldn't be viable. Does that mean we don't have a right here in our present environment that God gave us to be in, to be here? You see, so it's a false invented concept that has come up to just amaze people. It's amazing to me how people can fall for it, because it's the most obviously refuted argument that we can possibly imagine. What has happened is that the Supreme Court had to, what Shakespeare said, when you start to invent lies, you know what a tangled web we weave. When they came up with trimesters and viability, they had to invent one thing right after another to make all of this work to where they could actually legalize abortion. The semesters, again, are arbitrary, phantom kinds of choices. Third trimester being reserved because the fetus particularly is considered viable during that time. But again, if you take a newborn baby, a brand new infant, the brand new infant is not viable on its own either, even if it's born. If the mother and father don't take care of it, particularly the mother, it's going to die. So no infant, even after it's born, could be considered viable. It's just a phantom argument.
Okay, what about the argument a woman's right? A woman has the right over her, over her own body. This is constitutional, or even better, my favorite is how they use the right to privacy to okay abortion. Where do our rights begin and where do our rights end?
Yeah. Well, speaking as a lawyer, I know Lawrence Tribe of Harvard has come out with a book on abortion recently where he justifies the use of the right of privacy as coming from the Constitution. But, I just challenge anyone to just pull out a copy of the Constitution and start reading through it and see where a right of privacy is ever mentioned. Now, that's too simplistic an answer because we agree with all sorts of things that the Supreme Court has done where there's not literal language in the Constitution to support it. But when it comes to a right of privacy, it started off, for example, in the use of contraceptives for married couples. Mm-hmm. And it was said that marriage has a certain right of privacy that ought to be respected and honored. And I think most people would have agreed with that decision, even though there was no right of privacy mentioned in the Constitution. But when you go from right of privacy to what so many commentators now talk about, the right to be left alone. We have a right to be left alone. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
wait till the police officer stops you on the street for speeding. Yeah. I have a constitutional right to be left alone.
I'm going to use that one, and I'm going to call you to defend
That's
it when
right.
I go to
That's
court.
right. That we have expanded what could be considered a legitimate concern for something that is a moral relationship, marriage, into something which is immoral, which is abortion. And right of privacy to that extent is a manufactured, invented right. In fact, is in Roe v. Wade, the case that legalized abortion in America. The Supreme Court justices were very interesting. Blackmun said, we're not exactly sure where this right is found in the Constitution, but we know that it's large enough to include a woman's right to abort. Now, isn't that interesting? You have a fishing expedition, and they come back with a fish that they are sure is very big, but no one has ever seen any fish of that sort in the lake before.
So had this been a decision out of a lower court, and somebody decided to take this to a higher court, this decision might have been thrown out because there really is nothing in the books.
Well, it wouldn't have worked exactly that way because if the Supreme Court had agreed with the lower court, they would have just ratified it. But the important point is that the Constitution does not give a right to kill unborn children. There's not a chance in the world. In fact, if you go back to the founding fathers who wrote that Constitution, you will see a couple of very interesting things. One is that Thomas Paine in particular talked about, and he was a deist, by the way. He was not a moral majority, religious, conservative fundamentalist, right-winger. He was a deist who believed that God created the world and then closed up shop and went home. But even in his writings, he said that we have an absolute right to life because we are the result not of procreation, but of creation, that every time a child is born, it is a result of the ongoing creation of God, and that's why we have a right to life. So our rights are based in the fact that we are created. The Constitution grants us rights on the basis of underlying presuppositions. And those underlying presuppositions, not to get too technical here, are found in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Created. And those people were not using that as a euphemism. They believed in the literal creation of humankind. Again, even though they were not what we'd call evangelical Christians today. But because they believed we are created in the image of God, they believe that we have no control over life, that we cannot take life. So the founding fathers themselves had no concept of the right to abort. Mm-hmm. No concept whatsoever.
As long as we're talking about rights, what about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for the unborn child?
This is true, and let me tie back in what you asked earlier, which I really didn't get to, and that is the right of the woman to decide. Mm-hmm. If a woman has a right to decide certain things, the problem is that rights have to compete with rights.
Whose rights are more important?
And there is a hierarchy of rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as you have just mentioned here, is no coincidence of articulation. Life is most important.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have liberty, the freedom to decide other kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pursuit of happiness, which is probably much more frivolous. But when you're talking about women's right, the idea is not to limit the right of women, but the idea is to preserve the right to life, because if we can't preserve the right to life, we can't even begin to preserve the right to choose. The right to choose is dependent upon the far superior right to life. If we can't guarantee that, all other rights are in jeopardy.
When we talk about a humane society, I remember studying in school the atrocities of World War II and the death camps and the horrible things that were done to women. And, the whole argument against that period of time has always been, we are a humane society, we believe in human rights, we have freedoms, we believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How come this has not come up more often as an argument against abortion? I guess, we, of course, sit in our little homes, listen to all this on TV and think, well, why didn't they say that? Well, why didn't they say that?
Yeah.
Well, this is one of my, well, why aren't they using this?
Yeah. I tell you what's happening here is that we don't identify readily what's happening in abortion with human rights, because when we think of human rights, we think of adults. We sometimes think of children in terms of human rights, but less so than adults. So when you back it up to the baby in the womb,
Mm-hmm.
we don't think of human rights because it's not a person in being in terms of outside of the womb. But if we're talking in terms of human life, life that is developing, the little baby is not even a fully developed human being. I'm not sure when you get fully developed. Perhaps it's the second before you die. But we don't tend to think of human rights before that time, simply because we don't see. You see, for us, we are a generation of people that have to be shown by sight. We're not a people of faith. Faith perceives through the eye of faith. But if we can't see it, we don't believe it. And if the little person is still in the womb, it's sort of like it's not a little person there. And if we can back it up to what most people think is just a little blob of cells that are being removed from the woman's body, then we don't think of that as humanity. I think that's the problem. And I have to confess to you, this is confession time. I've decided here.
Oh, I like this.
When I was morally neutral on this issue, from a personal standpoint, I didn't realize the dynamics of what went on in abortion. I think that's one of the biggest problems that all of us face in terms of convincing the nation of what's happening. Surprisingly enough to me, even women, I think, sort of don't quite realize, at least women who've never been pregnant before, don't quite realize what all that's about.
Well, now, when you say the dynamics, do you mean that the actual abortion itself you didn't understand?
That's right. What is in existence that is aborted? Because I think we've all thought of these little glob of cells, something like the semen that gets it started in the first place, that we're just kind of removing the semen, as it were, from the woman. What we don't understand is that by the 18th day, the heart is beating. What we don't understand is that by the time most abortions take place, between 6 and 10, miniature little person with little developing fingers and lips and eyes. And if wombs had windows where we could see that, this entire debate would end immediately.
This is the end of Side 1. Please turn the cassette over at this point for the continuation of the message on Side 2.
There's some radical feminists, if I may say so, who probably would undoubtedly already have. I mean, they have already said no life is human life until we decide that it is. No mother has a baby until she decides it's a baby and wants to give it life. We endow this little creature with humanity, they say. But I think even radical feminists, even they, if they were to actually see the little person that's being sucked out or scraped out of the womb, they could not make the arguments they make anymore.
Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. I mean, I don't know of any way to put a window in the womb and fight this problem that way. So what do? We
put windows in the mind. We talk this up to where people like myself in the past understand the dynamics of what's going on and understand that there's a little person in there, that it's not just a blob of cells. We've got to get the message out.
And we haven't been.
We haven't been. And I think it may be because we assume that everyone knows and appreciates what we know. But all those who are working hard in favor of pro-life have to take a person such as myself as an example to say, look, if even a Christian author is only recently coming to understand this, we may have jumped over some basics. Because if you can teach people that it's a real human life involved, and I know one of the phrases is abortion stops a heart beating. I mean, that's one of the things we have to keep emphasizing, that there is something that is alive, living, developing, that is already human. And if we can do that, we've gone a long way down the road.
Has the pro-life movement done itself a disservice by building such close ties to the church?
I think so, because we are in such a secular society that people tend to dismiss anything that's associated with the formal moral majority or fundamentalist religion of any kind. They tend to simply dismiss it by saying, oh, well, you could expect that from them because they're churchy-type folks. Which is why in my book, When Choice Becomes God, I don't quote scriptures. I think I may have 3 scriptures in the whole book. Mine is directed to a secular audience, appealing to them on the basis of, hey, Woody Allen's movie Crimes and Misdemeanors, which caught my attention, and letting, as Paul did on Mars Hill, as some of your poets have said, and letting the secular people speak for themselves, to use secular reasoning and arguments so that they don't have the excuse of saying, well, Lagarde is a Catholic, or Lagarde is a fundamentalist, Lagarde is some kind of religious nut. I don't allow them that kind of leeway. What they've got to do is to look at logic head on, and facts and scientific evidence head on. Once we can couch it in that language, I think that we will have a broader appeal to the secular world, to the secular mind.
As a criminal law expert,
Yeah.
what about breaking the law to save a life?
It is not the way I would choose to win the battle, because I think that what is going to happen is that if we ever get a reversal of Roe v. Wade, then those who are still in favor of abortion are going to claim a right to break the law as well. We think that we are breaking the law with a higher law in mind, whereas they're going to be breaking the law with just self-will in mind. At least that's our perspective. But I don't want to give them any precedent for saying, look, you broke the law when it was the other way, and now we're going to break the law. I don't want to give them any precedent for that. What I would rather us do, if we can change America's heart, then we can perhaps change the laws as well to reflect that heart. But can we win hearts when they believe that we are people that they don't respect? Now, there is such an inconsistency, because during the marching for civil rights, racial equality, the tactics were no different, really, from what, let's say, Operation Rescue uses. And yet everybody sort of thought, well, that's okay. See, the problem, though, is that when we are dealing with this particular issue, it's so closely related to religious feelings, unlike racial equality, civil rights, that we are at somewhat of a disadvantage in using those kind of techniques. And from a tactical standpoint, I think, really, that we have created much more adverse reaction to pro-life in general than we have created goodwill for pro-life in general through those kinds of tactics. Being the good lawyer that I am, I will waffle completely and on the other side and say, however, a big however, this is something that all of us are individually going to have to be called on to do. That is not the way I would do it. But if people feel compelled to do that in the sight of God, if they feel like they're called to do that, that's something that they'll have to sort out for themselves.
I say, being the good interviewer that I am here, and I never have to give my opinion on anything. Let me throw this one at you, though. Do you not feel? I mean, let's take your book for instance. I mean, When Choice Becomes God. This is your statement on the pro-life, pro-choice movement. Basically, it is, and you have the ability as a writer to make a statement on a piece of paper that will last forever and ever. Most Americans out there do not have the ability to do that, but yet they want to make a statement on their beliefs on this issue. Do you not feel better that at least they're making a statement, even though you don't agree with the way they're doing it, than what was happening 4 and 5 years ago when everybody was just kind of sitting at home, twiddling their thumbs, saying, boy, we really need to pray about this?
Yeah. And I would say that the more forceful tactics, the argument would be that it raises America's consciousness. But my question is, what statement is it making? If it is making a statement that is turning away good people who would want to be on our side, and that's a large portion of America, if it is alienating the people that we need to make the ultimate change and bring things back to sanity, then tactically we've got to stop and ask ourselves, if we win a battle but lose the war, what have we accomplished? If we are unable ever through those kinds of tactics to make the ultimate change, we may have saved, let's just throw some figures around, we may have saved 1,000 babies from being aborted. But there's still 1.5 million out there who are going to be aborted every year. What we need to do is to think of the bigger picture, I think. If these kinds of tactics lead to solving the bigger picture, then I'm more sympathetic to it. But I would rather us have a total victory in terms of the war than skirmishes that we win here and there from one abortion clinic to the next. If we win those skirmishes and lose the bigger picture, the bigger war, then it may not have been worth it for us. Is
this going to wind up a war of words? And it's going to be who can use the rhetoric better? Is it going to end up being, who can deliver the best speech? Who can deliver the best platform argument? And why should human life be decided on rhetoric?
I wish I could say this as a neutral observer, but that's what I'm trying to accomplish in my book. I'm trying to give us something other than rhetoric that we can take to the secular mind, and even to the Christian mind, which is bought off on the secular mind to a large extent. Because I'm afraid that Christians are caught up in the same pro-choice thinking. They're anti-abortion, but pro-choice. Christian after Christian after Christian believes this. I wouldn't do it. I think it's morally wrong, but who am I to decide? Everybody has a right to decide for themselves. Christians are believing this. And what I'm trying to do in my book is to address in a calm, dispassionate, sensitive way the larger issues that will bring us to God's truth. Something that doesn't fit well on a bumper sticker. And to be honest, it's a little more challenging reading than most of the books I've written because it's a more challenging problem that we're dealing with here. But I'm trying to get to the whole pro-choice philosophy, not just abortion. Abortion is a major battle. But as we mentioned a while ago, this philosophy is the real war. Who is going to be God? Is God going to be God, or is choice going to be God? Individual choice. I'll do what I want to do, you see. We've got to win that war, that overall war. If we win that war, then we will automatically win the battle over abortion. If we can get a secular society to see that there has to be an end to personal choice in certain areas, then we can start to talk with them without rhetoric on a much higher plane of rationality that will still reflect God's truth.
How are you going to accomplish that, though, in a society that has become so new age? And let me define that not just religion, but as a way of life. I don't think that there are a lot of people maybe walking around thinking they're little gods in the making, but there are a lot of people who are really relishing this quote-unquote new age and all the freedoms that they have. And, you know, you're going to have those that are going to stand back and they're going to say, but, you know, this is everything we're fighting for, and boy, we finally got that Iron Curtain down, and, I mean, communism's turning around, and boy, isn't this great. Everything we believe in, freedom of choice, democracy, is finally becoming, you know, it's coming now, and it's here. And what are we doing in America? You want to take one of my freedoms of choice away from me. How are you going to convince them that there are certain areas that have to be ordained by God in a totally ungodly society?
All right, I'm going to give you my cynical self first.
Okay.
We may not. We have witnessed historically the rise and fall of nations. America is in a post-Christian era. We are now a pagan nation.
You really believe that?
I really believe that. I don't have any doubt in my mind about that. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons that I feel so strongly about it is that I live half of a year in England. And England is where we got Christianity from our own roots. The hymns that we sing, the great hymns, came from a country that had a little church in every village and hamlet across the nation. Those buildings are still there. No one's in them. They're falling down from disrepair. England is a godless Christian nation, pagan to the core. They admit it themselves. The Church of England is involved in politics, involved in social kinds of things.
Involved in everything but God.
Everything but God. They are a forerunner to what's happening in our own country.
Is this happening in churches here in the United States?
It's happening in churches in the United States. We're becoming involved in virtually everything but salvation and redemption. Anyone who's listening to us who says, no, I just don't believe that. The reason they may not believe that is because they are among people who, like themselves, are still worshiping God, and praise God for that. What you've got to do is to not look at the people in your church, but look at the people next door and down the street. What's happening in their lives spiritually? Are they Christians? Well, nominally they are. Of course, if you ask them, what are you? Well, I'm a Christian. But are they actually worshiping Jesus Christ as a believer ought to do? Do they read their Bibles? Do they pray, etc.? They don't. And so we may not make this turnaround. But to me, the issue of abortion has now that I've seen the light on this thing, the issue of abortion seems to me to be the focal battle. You know, it's in every war there is one battle that everything hinges on. And this is it. If we can kill our children, if that's what our philosophy allows us to do, then we can do anything. And so we've got to win this particular battle. Now, my positive self comes out. My positive self says, yes, we can win the battle, but we will have to do it by not only barraging people with bumper stickers and slogans and chants and shouting outside of abortion clinics and so forth. We're going to have to work our way somehow into their minds and into their hearts. It'll be a quiet revolution. It'll be passing around books, and my publisher would like me to say this, but I'm not saying because it's self-serving. Read books like the one I've written, not just mine, but others that are putting the message out, and get them in the hands of the people who count. Your friends and neighbors, of course, first, but legislators. We have got to, you see, they're running scared now. All the political power that's up for grabs in the next elections. We have got to not berate them with shouts that we're not going to vote for them necessarily if they don't change their minds. We've got to get the message through them so that they, on their own initiative, do not react from political power plays, but from their own conscience, where each legislator finally sees the light and says, now I understand what that argument is all about. And when you get a nation that finally understands it, then you don't have to have the protest, you don't have to have disobedience to the law, and you don't have to have major legislative battles. If we can change the hearts and the minds, which I think we can if we get the message through calmly, quietly, patiently, then we can win that battle.
Let's take this down to a more personal level for you. Are you a father?
I'm a bachelor.
You're a bachelor? So you have never experienced that 9-month have a baby personally kind of experience.
No, the closest I get to it is writing a book that takes 9 months, and it's very similar in all the
and all of its pain, right? Do you think it's harder do you think the reason that you waffled on this issue for so long was that from a male point of view you had a hard time grasping? And I ask this from a female perspective, and I know there are a lot of hardened feminists out there that said, well, I don't care, I'm a female and I have no problem with this. But I guess from a female point of view, I have a hard time with the thought of it, because in my mind, boy, the minute it's there, it's that kid, and I'm going to play symphony music to it from day one if I have to make it into some wonderful, great composer if I have anything to say about it. But is it harder for you because you're a man?
I think it is. I think that men don't have to come to grips with the issue in the same way that women do.
And since we have men still running our government...
Yeah, we're going to have to get through it to their minds and their hearts. You're going to have to get through to them the same way that somebody got through to me.
And what I mean, other than the fact that you know a lot of women who have had abortions, what was it that really triggered When Choice Becomes God? I mean, there had to be one thing that really got your gut.
There was, and it's the most likely event imaginable. A friend of mine called me up and said, Lagarde, you need to go see Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors.
That was it.
And I went to see Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors. If you haven't seen it, it's a movie about a fellow who has an affair with a woman. Over a 2-year period of time, he's a successful ophthalmologist and so forth. She finally decides she's going to take him away from his wife, writes a letter explaining about her, tries to talk her out of exposing their affair. She won't do it, becomes terribly neurotic about the whole idea. So he decides, at the urging of a brother of his, who has some pretty shady friends, that he's going to kill her. And he does kill her. Initially, the idea is repugnant to him. Stamp out human life, he says. Stamp out human life. We're not talking about a bug here, he says. But eventually, in order to save his life, style, and what he wants to be and to do with his family, he has the woman killed. Doesn't talk about abortion, but all of the same arguments that he used to convince himself to kill a live human being, adult, are the arguments that are being used to justify abortion. And the next morning, after seeing this film, it all came together for me, and I finally realized, yeah, that's what's happening. We are sacrificing life to lifestyle, and we're doing it all for the wrong reasons.
Has the fact that we've become a very jaded community affected, or is it going to affect this silent battle that you say is going to happen? I mean, let's face it. You turn on your TV and you see crime after crime, violence after violence. I don't know that kids are shocked by anything anymore. I really don't think they are. It would take an awful lot to shock me. It would probably take even more to shock you. Right. I see that as only being a major hindrance in this battle.
It is. Once again, though, I think that more important than that problem is that we don't understand what is being violated in this violence, because we don't see the violence. Again, if wombs had windows, we'd see the little person that is the object of the violence. I don't think it's as much that we're jaded as that we don't understand that there is violence involved in abortion. What we think is there's a surgical operation, as if you were having liposuction to remove fat cells, or removing an appendix. We don't understand what is happening dynamically. If we did, we would see that violence. And I think, despite all of our jadedness to violence, that we would probably react favorably to stop the violence that is taking place in abortion.
Your whole profession is built on a very proud attitude about your ability to grasp logic and explain logic and make everything cut and dry before a court of law and before the rest of society. How do you logically explain what is happening in an abortion?
Well, I don't think logic enters into it. It's just simple facts and photographs. Facts and photographs will take care of this argument if people are willing to take the time to look at them. I don't have to use any heavy logic to say, look at this little person here. We're about to kill this little person here, and here we go. And that little person
somebody
goes.
is going to put up a picture of a 12-year-old little girl who was raped 2 weeks ago, who was horribly violated, who is going to have untold years of misery simply due to the rape, much less being forced to carry for 9 months the evidence of that rape. Let's hold up that little girl's picture. What about that little girl?
Well, if you want to get back into to logic, there's two levels of logic we've got to use here. One is that those pictures comprise 0.1% of all abortions. 99.9% of all abortions would be pictures of just the little baby being aborted, the baby that was conceived not out of rape, but under other circumstances.
And please understand, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Oh, I know that.
What about the 1/10? Do we just write them off?
The next level of logic, then, we address them directly. What about that 0.1%? The first thing we have to realize is that with rape, there's a victim. With abortion, there is a victim. With the decision to make or to have an abortion, there is a victim. If we have a rape, we've already got one victim. If we have an abortion, we have the second victim, the fetus that's aborted. And surprisingly enough, amazingly enough, the decision to abort victimizes the rape victim all over again. She is not immune, despite the circumstances of becoming pregnant. She herself is not immune from the same kind of post-abortion trauma that other women experience as a result of their decision to abort. That's one of those we have forgotten about, that we victimize her not only once through the rape, but twice in response to her decision to abort. I'm sitting here as a man, don't have a clue about what it'd be like to be pregnant, don't have a clue what it'd be like to be raped, don't have a clue about what it'd be like to carry the fetus of someone who'd raped me. To be honest, most women could not experience that either. They would not know what it's like to carry a child of a father who's raped the mother. So 0.1% of the entire population could relate to that, and no more probably. And yet we have testimony after testimony from women who have gone through with the delivery of their babies who resulted from rape, who are glad that they did it, and who would have felt terrible if they had victimized what truly is an innocent victim in the rape, and that is the baby. The baby is not the one who caused the rape. And I'll tell you, as a criminal law professor, what's very interesting to me is that if a woman is raped, if she were to wait to the next day after the rape and see the man who raped her and kill that man, we would charge her with murder. That's the man who raped her. She's guilty of murder. But if she is killing the innocent fetus, which is the offspring of that rape, then we think, well, no, that's okay. You can't kill the guilty perpetrator of the rape, but you can kill the innocent victim of the rape. You see, logically, that doesn't make sense.
Can you give me
It's a hard case, by the way. Listen, it's easy for us. These are hard cases, and there's no need to pretend that they're not hard cases. But hard cases, as we say, make bad law. If I thought that we could have a law that outlawed all abortions except in cases of rape, if that's all I could get, I would go for that law because 99.9% of all abortions would end.
Right.
But logically, consistency demands that we protect even the innocent life that is a victim of a rape.
And I've always found it interesting that in the cases of, a mother whose life is endangered by the birth, the option to terminate that birth, I always found it interesting that they say that 99% of those cases, the mother always opts to terminate her own life. It's always, save my baby, don't worry about me. So that has been one of the arguments, you always hear in cases of rape or danger to the mother. Well, you hear so often that the mother is always more interested in the child being saved.
That may be true, but a couple things on that. One is we're back to our 0.1%. Again, it rarely happens.
Yes.
And even the pro-choice people, I can give you the quote that's in my book, they know it rarely happens. And in tubal pregnancy, for example, I mean, the baby's inevitably going to die.
Right.
And the mother would die if you didn't have an abortion. I mean, that is one of those situations where you just don't have any choice whatsoever. But I don't know anyone who seriously, even among pro-life people, who seriously would object to an abortion to save the mother's life. We're talking here not about an innocent whose life is being taken, but two innocents
Whose life, yes.
whose lives are at risk. And the mother being extant already, she has relationships with other children perhaps she's responsible for. Pro-choice people like to say, well, pro-lifers wouldn't even let you have an abortion if it threatens the mother's life. That's crazy. That's
Right.
madness.
Right.
Absolute madness and dishonest. Because people who are in favor of pro-life recognize that there is just, you don't really have a choice in that situation. It's the same as if we have self-defense. It's a choice of evils between two innocent people.
Right. Since, and let me paraphrase, since choice has become God, how many innocent lives have been lost to abortion?
And the figure that virtually everyone accepts on both sides, I think, is about 1.5 million per year, which from the time you asked that question until now that I'm answering it, every 22 seconds there's been someone else aborted. That's an interesting statistic.
Now then, let me wrap it up with this, and it ties into this. I read somewhere, and I'd give anything if I could remember who stated this, and if you know, please tell me. But I read somewhere, a very brilliant individual who said that every civilization is only one generation away from extinction. Are we in danger if this continues, if we don't figure out a way to put a stop to it? Other than the fact that there are going to be more innocent lives lost, which is a very big fact, but are we in danger of eradicating our own society?
I don't think we're in danger of eradicating our society from a physical standpoint. Spiritually, socially, I've already mentioned to you that I think that we are headed far down the track toward disintegration morally, and that will lead ultimately in years to come politically and economically. But let's don't end on a cynical note.
Okay, and on a positive note.
On a positive note, if we can turn this around, if we can grab the nation's attention and win this battle, it's very much like our other civil war. We've had a civil war and we've survived, and we're back to it now again for another civil war. If we can win this war and regain the high moral ground, if we can win it on the battle of abortion, we may start winning it on other battles as well. Homosexuality, home and family, the marriage, drugs. If we can capture the nation's imagination about what it means to find transcendent moral truth that guides our choices and dictates our choices in right ways, then we may be able to pull it back together.
When choice becomes God, it's on your bookshelves, in your local Christian bookstore, by F. LaGard Smith. It's something that each human being, not even as a Christian, if you're listening to this and you're not even a Christian, it's something that each of us is going to have to make a decision on. It's going to affect society for the years to come. It's going to affect our way of life. It's going to affect future generations when choice becomes God. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
This is the end of the message. For further information regarding other topics available on cassette and in printed form, write Compassion Connection, Box 36C, Denver, Colorado, 80236.